ahead. Okay, welcome everybody. We are live on YouTube as well as here live at Venable. So thank you guys for attending today's event. This is the second part in a two-part series focused on solving the workforce challenge. My name is Ross Noderft. I am coming to you from ADI, the Alliance for Digital Innovation. We are a trade association focused on technology, bringing technology innovation into the public sector. This is, an exciting issue area for us. We cover a gamut of very focused issues, from IT modernization to acquisition policy to cybersecurity policy, and then workforce policy. It's one of the core tenets of what we at the Alliance for Digital Innovation care deeply about and want to help move forward at the federal as well as the state and local levels. So without further ado, I want to bring up our partner for this event. Again, this is the second of the events that they've partnered with us on. They're a new member to ADI and they're coming out swinging, and we really appreciate their work with us to date. So I'd like to bring up Wayne Bobby, Vice President for U.S. Federal at Workday. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ross, and thank you all for being here today. As Ross mentioned, this is the second event in our series with ADI. Last month's event focused on recruiting, training, and retaining talent, and our speakers did a fantastic job laying out the issues and challenges facing the federal workforce. There are dozens of challenges currently facing the federal government, from budgetary uncertainties, lengthy hiring cycles, to high turnover that's going on today. Combine this with an aging workforce and difficulty recruiting Gen Z and millennials to the public sector, all in the midst of an election year. It's not surprising that Congress, the White House, and federal agencies are putting a focus on strengthening their human capital strategies. I think it's just what staggered me as a former federal employee that less than 10% of the federal workforce is under 30 years old today. That's kind of like, so what's going to be this next generation federal workforce? So government leaders are trying to build a workforce that can support our public sector missions in today's changing world, and they rightly are looking to provide their employees with not just a job, but a career. As Pam Coleman from OMB highlighted during the first event, the strength and success of any organization relies on the strength of its people and its technology. There's so much truth in that statement, whether you're in the federal government, a company like Workday, where I'm a part of, or even a small startup. No organization can function or accomplish its mission without a strong workforce. For me, empowering and optimizing the federal workforce is deeply personal, as I come from a family of federal employees who grew up locally, spent the first 17 years of my professional career working in financial management at the State Department. In many ways, my experience at the State Department served as a catalyst for my career and continues to shape many of the things I'm still doing today at Workday. One of those aspects is advocating for stronger partnerships between the federal government and the private sector. During my time in the federal government, there was a mindset among leaders that they had to build and manage their own IT systems and infrastructure as opposed to buying services from the private sector. At that time, technological advances and ability to scale in the private sector was lacking. I think today, kind of finding that balance between the private sector and public sector is really key to make sure that the public sector organization is focused on their mission, and I guess the most important thing. The majority of IT solutions acquired by the federal government are rendered obsolete the day that they're installed, largely because they take way too long to get through the procurement system. There's no doubt that technologies developed by the private sector continue to evolve at a rapid pace. Increasing partnerships between the public sector and private sector have proven to reduce complexity, cost, and allow the federal government to focus on resources and staff on its core mission of providing critical services to the American people. Workday maintains a 97% customer satisfaction rating across 9,000 organizations in a broad array of sectors, including healthcare, financial services, retail, hospitality, education, and state and local government. We're confident we can partner with the federal government to assist in enhancing building a 21st century workforce. And you think about it, all of those industries exist within the federal government. We're doing healthcare, we're doing retail operations, we're doing manufacturing, we're doing hospitality. All that exists within federal today. Workday solutions unify talent management, time and attendance, and recruitment, which allows government or agencies the ability to automate their day-to-day personnel processes and give their workers more control through self-service options. Our services allow agencies to operate more strategically, hire and develop a top-performing workforce, and adapt quickly to change, all while staying focused on serving the federal government's constituents, the American people. So again, thank you to Ross and ADI for allowing Workday to be a part of this partnership and being here today. We look forward to the rest of the program. Ross.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you again to the folks at Workday for making this happen. All right. So for those of you who were looking at the run of show for this particular event, I will tell you that we were the victim of congressional voting. So we were going to have the congressman open up with a keynote. Instead, he has agreed to come in and close the keynote. So we are first of all, I want to say thank you to our panelists who have been very flexible with their time. To include the folks that are also on virtually. Thank you guys for moving around your time to do this panel at the beginning. So without further ado, I want to start with introductions. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves. We'll start actually with the folks here, and then we'll go to the folks who are live with us on screen. So Michelle, and then Tricia.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Stuntz. I'm a senior partner at Korn Ferry. Korn Ferry is an executive search and talent consultancy. And my day job is I run our consumer industry vertical. So CPG, retail, travel, hospitality, leisure, sports, media, and entertainment. So a whole lot of fun stuff. Also, prior to working in the commercial space, I was a federal government consultant for, I think, around 8 years. With Deloitte Consulting. So I've got a good amount of experience on both sides of the fence.
Tricia.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tricia Dameron. I'm the Human Resources Manager for Strongbridge. Strongbridge is a small government contractor. We have about 100 employees. We're focused on modernizing old legacy systems. So what I do is we have a Human Resources Department of one, that's me. And I handle some of the recruiting, although we've been lucky enough to partner with some folks who are working as consultants for us to assist us in recruiting efforts. And before I came to Strongbridge, I was with state government. I actually worked for VDOT for 8 years. And I actually started my human resources career in healthcare with Inova. So a couple of different opportunities to learn about what it looks like in different spots. But I'm with Strongbridge 10 years now. I just celebrated my 10-year anniversary last week. So that was exciting. So happy to be here.
Great. Thank you. And we'll go to Landon and then Dr. Coleman.
Hi, thank you. My name is Landon Mock. I am the Director of Strategic Talent Management within the Department of the Interior's Office of Human Capital. So our division is responsible for oversight of pretty much all things related to recruitment and hiring, to include staffing, job analysis, assessment, classification, position management, compensation, just a whole range of issues. So happy to be here today. My background is actually as an industrial organizational psychologist. That's what brought me to Interior originally some years ago. And prior to that, I was a part of the Office of Personnel Management's Classification and Assessment Policy Group.
That's great. Dr. Coleman.
Hi, my name is Liz Coleman, and I am an IO psychologist in the same office with Landon. My background is with, I actually was with the Navy for 18 years before coming over to the Office of Human Capital at Department of Interior.
All right. Thank you guys very much for joining us. So let me set a little bit of the background before we get into the meat of this. This is part 2 of a 2-part series. You don't need to have seen the first part, but in a nutshell, we covered a lot of the issues that are plaguing some of the federal and private sector partners that support the federal government in bringing specialized talent with a focus on technology talent in the last one into the government, right? So what are the hurdles that we see, whether it's, making sure that we are able to access folks that don't wind up on the initial cert list, making sure that we're using all of our flexible authorities, making sure that we are taking into consideration compensation, both from a from a contracting standpoint, as well as from a standpoint when you're competing for specialized talent within the government. So we covered a range of issues. What we didn't quite get to was how to solve those issues. So what you're going to see today is some of the best and brightest, both from inside of our government as well as from outside of our government. So we have everybody from some of the best in the commercial sector, some of the leading folks who are dealing with it at the cusp of the contracting base, and then what the folks who are kind of the bright stars that were told to us that we really needed to bring into the conversation from the Department of Interior. So that's the panel you have today. We're pretty lucky, frankly, to have the folks that we have. So let's get into the meat of it. Start with an easy one to kind of set the ground. What do you guys see as some of the issues that we're going to solve, or some of the issues that you guys are working on, so we understand kind of where that starting point is? Michelle?
Sure. I mean, that's a big question. So there's a lot of directions. Oops. See, I already forgot. It's like the new you're on mute. It's the live version of it. It's a big question, right? So there's a wide range of things that you can talk about as it pertains to this. But as I said, we do kind of full scale talent consulting. So we do look at both from the recruitment side all the way through retention, and then how you exit people from your organization, as well as how you train them. And I think that there's a couple of trends that we're seeing that are important. I think first, and it's an important one for the government to tackle, is around your value proposition for talent and what they get from working with you, and how you are delivering on the promise that young people especially want from the organizations where they work, around ESG, around DEI, around people want to align themselves with organizations that reflect the values that they have. And that's something that people are making decisions, employment decisions, based on that right now. And we're seeing that a lot. We're seeing people go through a hiring process and then not being happy with some policy, not being happy with the parental leave policy, not being happy with what the organization is doing for environmental sustainability, not being happy with what the organization is doing around DEI, and they're walking away. And they have other opportunities, so they can't, as you know. So I think that that's a really important one. I think the speed of talent and the talent market is another important one that we're seeing in the commercial sector. Certainly, people, the high profile or the high demand jobs are turning over in days instead of weeks even, and things that would take months are taking weeks. And so everything is just really condensed. And that means that requirements are loosening and things are changing about how organizations are going after that talent. And you mentioned hiring authorities, and that's something that's important for the government to be thinking about. I think once people are in the door, the experience that they're looking for is different, especially in the post-COVID environment. There's different ways of working, and there's a little bit too much hangover sometimes of the past and the way things used to be. And I had to work in the office 5 days a week, so the young people should have to work in the office 5 days a week. I didn't get parental leave because back in the day, women went back to work just days after giving birth. And so that's what they should, there's just a lot of that's going on. And it's time to kind of shed that. And the companies that are winning, the organizations that are winning, are the ones that are saying it's not about how it used to be. It's about what's the best way of working to align with the work that needs to be done. And that's a really important thing to be purposeful about, and that every organization, whether it's government or commercial, private organization, needs to be purposeful about. I think along those lines, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we're seeing a mass exodus of women from the workforce because of COVID, because of different policies, because of the lack of childcare, because all the reasons that we're all familiar with. But it's a major problem in the commercial space, and I'm sure it's a major problem in the government space as well, that you're losing your female talent. I'll pause there because I know that my colleagues are going to add other things, but those are some of the top trends that I'm seeing in the commercial space.
That's great. Tricia?
There we go. So I would echo a lot of the same things Michelle said. In addition, as a government contractor, it's a small beltway, they always say. So we're competing for the same talent in the same sort of circle area. One thing COVID did for us is it allowed us in a lot of ways to open up our search so that we could seek candidates who were outside the district, Maryland, Virginia, and have an opportunity to take advantage of candidates that were in different fields, not necessarily in government contracting if it wasn't required as part of whatever the role was. Also, with us as a small company, we really are looking for people who want to stay and stick around, those who are agile enough to want to take on different responsibilities and opportunities, learn new technologies. So when we're looking for candidates, we're kind of not just looking at them for today and the value that they can bring and can they do the job, but what is the job going to look like 6 months or a year from now? How's the task going to change? Are they going to be up for that challenge? And in some ways that sort of limits our pool even more, which is another challenge. So within our area now too, with private employers since COVID, salaries have gone up, and private employers who maybe were less flexible before are a lot more flexible now. So it's even more competitive than it's ever been. And in terms of, the culture and values and all those things, yeah, if you have 2 or 3 or 4 offers on the table, ultimately, yes, that could make the decision for you. So figuring out how to make ourselves appeal to folks that's important to, and it's not important to everybody. Some people are really just about the bottom line and they don't care about benefits. They really care about the pay, or they really only want to work from home, and that's really the most important thing to them. So, we can't have sort of one model that's going to work for everybody. We have to have the flexibility. We have to be agile. We have to be able to shift through everything that's changing. And the landscape is so different now than it was 2 and 3 years ago that I think we're all still figuring out what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. No, 100%. We still haven't caught up with the ramifications of COVID, right? On the workforce level. So turning to my DOI colleagues, Landon, can we start with you? Set the stage for us. What are some of the challenges that you guys are facing at DOI? And then Dr. Coman, if you could get into some of the specific and unique areas that DOI is dealing with from a workforce issue, that'd be helpful.
Sure, thank you. So DOI consists of roughly 70,000 employees, over 2,400 locations across the US and abroad, with employees in over 300 different occupational series. So we have a wide variety of work that we're doing in support of our overarching mission. I would echo some of the concerns that have been brought forth so far by my colleagues on the panel, specifically with regards to the amount of time it takes to bring people on board, in the effort inherent in hiring in the federal government. I would conceptualize the difficulties, I suppose, both external sourcing of talent and internal sourcing of talent. So for external sourcing of talent, one of the things that we've really been trying to improve upon is something that I believe Michelle had mentioned about thinking about how to do things in the most effective way in current times going forward, not just replicating the same practices that we've relied upon in the past. So for example, at Interior, we have over 4 dozen hiring authorities that we can use to bring on people. And a lot of times we're just relying on what kind of gets referred to as post and pray, where we just post a job vacancy to USA Jobs and hope for the best. And there's not maybe as much active recruitment as there ought to be. And there's maybe not as much of a strategic focus on what hiring authorities may be applicable that could bring people on in a much more, much quicker manner. So just working on ways in which to inform those conversations between our staffing specialists and our hiring managers based on the specific hiring scenario, the type of occupation you're hiring to, the level within the organization you're hiring to, whether it's a permanent position or a temporary position, just being aware of the flexibilities available and making good use of those and informing those conversations. Additionally, with internal sourcing and covering both internal hiring as well as retention, one of the things that we've seen, our office oversees our entry and exit survey program. So one of the things we commonly see with our exit surveys, reasons why people are leaving the organization, tend to have to do with career growth opportunities or ability to get a better job within the organization. So one of the ways in which we have been working over the last few years to address that issue is and apply technology to be able to do so in a proactive manner is through the creation of My DOI Career, which is essentially a career path tool and ecosystem that our current employees can go explore whether which types of occupations they may already have applicable skill sets for based on the occupation they're currently in. It also doubles as a great recruiting tool. So for example, a lot of our hiring locations or a lot of our positions are located in the Western United States, where a hiring manager might be a day's drive away from the local college. So on-campus recruitment isn't always the best option. So having those online tools available to be able to direct students towards and be able to get them in the door, get excited about the opportunities within the department. Because like I mentioned, we have over 300 occupations. We kind of have something for everybody. So just being able to make apparent what opportunities there are within the department has been really imperative for us.
Landon, before we go on to Dr. Coman, I want to make sure that I capture some of these numbers, because I think it's important for the folks both here in the room and listening online to understand the scope of what you're talking about. I heard 4 dozen hiring authorities, 4 dozen different hiring authorities. I heard 300 career opportunities, types of different careers that you're dealing with. And then I heard, well, maybe I'm extrapolating here, but hundreds of hiring managers that you're dealing with on a regular basis to educate them on this, right? So you've got multiples and orders of magnitude of ways of having to basically educate internally in your department ways to execute on bringing people in and then retaining those folks. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure we understand the scope of the problem. So, Dr. Coman, what are we missing here? What is especially about DOI that's unique?
Well, first off, let me give a little bit of an overview of DOI. So, because honestly, we're a lot bigger than I think most people realize. The department focuses on 3 main areas: protecting and managing the nation's natural and cultural resources. We also provide scientific information about those resources, and we honor its trust responsibilities to American Indians, Native Alaskans, and affiliated island communities. So, like Landon mentioned, we're comprised of 11 bureaus and 8 offices. We engage over 70,000 employees. We also have 280,000 volunteers across 2,400 operating locations. So as you can see, we're a pretty big organization with a really diverse scope for what we cover and hire for. And we're literally spread across the country. So for us, we took a really proactive approach when the assessment executive order came out. So the executive order is requiring hiring best practices be put into place by federal agencies. And it made sense to us. We truly believe in implementing hiring best practices, and we wanted the right person in the right job. So here at DOI, our approach was a very holistic approach. And what I mean by that is that we focused on the cultural change that needed to happen, along with providing the workforce with the tools and resources that needed that to happen as well. So, for example, our leadership supported the culture change with policy. So that was the top-down stuff that needed to happen. We also procured and funded an online assessment battery. So our HR professionals had the assessment platform that they needed to use. And we provided training seminars. We wrote an assessment guide. Then we rewrote the assessment guide with more information because we were in a continuous process improvement mode with this whole change management approach. We also established an assessment working group. So we had a touch point with each of our bureaus. And this really helped, as it was an informal way to share feedback and lessons learned across the organization. And then lastly, a really unique, cool tool that DOI has is our DOI career tool. It has over 100 series featured, and job seekers anywhere really can go online and see profiles of different positions and locations where they're offered. So let's say, for example, someone has a family in another part of the country and they want to move, they can go and see what jobs are in that location and try to find a position there. So anyways, I could go on and on about DOI, but I want to make sure I give our other panelists some time to talk too. So I'll wrap it up by saying, last year, our efforts resulted in a 14,000% increase in the use of non-self-report assessments. So we're pretty proud of those numbers.
It's great. It's great. So let's talk about, you started down this path. let's talk about recruitment. What are we seeing from a recruitment standpoint? I think each of you guys have a unique perspective. You talked a little bit, DOI folks, about recruiting in the West, but I'm curious. Tricia, let's start with you first, and then just generally in commercial. Where are we seeing kind of shifts in recruitment? Where do you focus personally at StrongBridge? I'm curious to really bring in and drive that talent. And give me the profile of the folks that you're looking at as well.
In terms of like the technology that we're focused on or where we're actually finding people.
What the profile is of the individual that you're looking for, young, old, tall, short, all the above.
Yes. Everywhere, everything, everywhere. I find that a lot of our hires come from someone new, someone who reached out to someone else, and it's sort of a 6 degrees of separation kind of, someone gets in touch with us. Our recruitment is pretty focused, targeted at those who meet the skills. And when we talk about how we're finding them, we're doing it mostly on LinkedIn and Indeed. But it is, places like this or opportunities where you know somebody or your neighbor's looking for a job, that kind of thing. And sometimes that takes a lot longer. So the jobs are open longer, I'm finding. And when you do find candidates who you think might work out, they're not staying. So we're having this weird thing where people are staying and going through this whole long process to get hired with us, and then they leave very quickly and take something else that they say that they had been waiting for and ours came through first, that kind of thing. So there doesn't seem to be a lot of loyalty to the employer anymore, and maybe that's just sort of the way that things are right now. But we have labor categories that we have to make sure that folks meet the minimum qualifications for. So where we kind of sort of fall short, or where we have less flexibility and less opportunity, is maybe a new grad out of college, or internship programs where we're trying to teach people from within and then have them take over roles for us. We don't have that opportunity because we've got to, in order to bill for the position, they've already got to meet these 5 criteria or 10 criteria, whatever they are. So that sort of makes it even harder for us to organically be able to source people. We really need folks that are already experienced, already in the workforce. They cost more. And so then we're, against that. And then sometimes they're passive employees, or passive candidates. So then you're reaching out to your competitors and trying to poach people. I mean, that's what we're doing. That's what everybody does. So I guess that's it.
No, that's interesting. That's super helpful. I want to go, Michelle, I want to come back to you in a second, but folks over at DOI, I think what's one, we want to hear kind of who's your person of interest mostly. I know you have 300 potential careers, but give me like a prototypical person who's going to come either to you at DOI or who you guys are approaching. And then, one of the things that I'd be curious about is how do you guys help your contracting base solve the labor category issue that Tricia was bringing up?
Sure. So Ross, to your first point, who are we looking for? Just about everybody. So we hire for STEM positions, we hire for administrative positions, we hire for wildland firefighting, we hire for park rangers, law enforcement. We've got a little bit of everything. We hire people that are extremely online, and we hire from areas where connectivity maybe isn't where you would like it to be. And so we have to keep those sorts of considerations in mind when we advocate for specific assessment practices or how we conduct recruitment and outreach to those communities. So it's really, it takes a village here at DOI to be able to fit into all of the different occupations that we need to be successful in order to achieve our mission. And then I didn't catch the second portion of your question.
So I was curious when Tricia brought up the labor categories, right? She has to come to an agency with set labor categories, which makes it very difficult for a small company to recruit somebody right out of college and then train them to hit that 5 years of experience without losing them, right? It's hard to keep them in-house at a contractor. I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts or given any thoughts to how to work with the contracting community to help enable that growth within.
Sure. So that specific issue hasn't come up with us within our office. However, in the federal government, we're subject to things like time and grade requirements. So, for higher graded positions, typically you need to have experience at a higher grade level. And in a lot of cases, career ladder positions maybe aren't being used as frequently as they have in decades past. So when we have, for example, a GS-12 scientist retire, we might be filling that position at the GS-12 level because we are only allocated funding for the one position, whereas in the past we might have hired somebody proactively out of school or fresh out of the military at a lower grade level and let them train up over the years. And so we're trying to get back to that mentality of utilizing career ladder positions where we can so that we can grow our own employees and train them internally. One of the other, just to speak a little bit to the recruitment sourcing question, one of the other ways we're trying to incorporate technology into that to solve that puzzle there are a number of tools made available recently from the Office of Personnel Management through USA Jobs to be able to do a little bit more with regards to resume mining, with regards to using the agency talent portal, and pairing those with some of those special hiring authorities in order to be able to go out and connect managers to potential candidates so that they can conduct active recruitment for their postings. So for example, let's say we are hiring for a GS-13 geologist, and you can go on USA Jobs and search the agency talent portal, mine for resumes and see which candidates are in your location, or if it's a remote position, even better, where you're not bound by location. So you can actually reach out to them, let them know that an advertisement is going to be coming up and you think they may be a good candidate. And with direct hiring authority streamlining the hiring process, you can then be able to bring people on a little bit more quickly through that mechanism. So really just trying to sync up some of those different solutions together wherever possible to both source potential recruits for new positions, as well as leverage the flexibilities we have to be able to bring people on quickly.
That's helpful. Michelle, on the commercial side, so a couple questions we covered here. What are the ways that you're seeing folks reach out and bring talent in? And then two, how are you seeing the shift in what people are targeting for different positions? Are you seeing it change?
Yeah, absolutely. I think pseudo addressing what you're asking, Ross, but going back to what Landon was talking about, we are seeing a shift in how companies look at their build versus buy strategies. And so what historically you would see is that a company is one or the other. We're a builder, we're a buyer. We buy our talent, we churn through it, we're fine when they leave, and we're just going to buy some more talent. Or we're a builder, we keep our people forever. We build this loyalty. We want our people to stay with us forever, and we're going to give them this career growth. And what I think we're finding more is that companies are being more targeted in their strategies. And so maybe in technology, you're willing to be a buyer, but in another aspect of your company, in one of your business units, you want to be a builder. And so we see companies kind of diversifying their strategy for their talent acquisition strategies in a more micro sense, instead of just having kind of blanket culture of the company, which I think is very relevant in the federal space as well, because building isn't always the right answer. Sometimes it is buying talent every 2 years, and that's what you're going to do, and it makes sense, and it makes sense for you, and it makes sense for that talent, and it makes sense for everybody. So I think that's one of the things. Just building off of what Landon was talking about. A couple of other trends in the recruiting piece, I would say transparency, which honestly the government has always been pretty transparent about hiring, but the commercial space is catching up, and there's rules that are helping them catch up, such as the transparency around salaries, not being able to ask previous salaries, things like that. So the transparency is certainly something that's evolving. In terms of what people are looking for, I would say a couple of things. People are being much more purposeful about diversity, but in a different way. The conversations are changing a little bit, because it's not about finding someone who looks different, who has the same set of criteria. It's changing the criteria, because you have to change the criteria if you want to include people, because that's what diversity is. It's people with different experiences. And some look different and some don't, and some act different and some don't. But that's the essence of diversity. And so we especially see that at the board level, the boards of organizations, that if you look at a board spec, they always are going to produce the same person that the spec has always produced. You have to change the spec if you want to change the candidate pool. And that's something that we're definitely seeing, is changing of specs to change the candidate pool to bring in more diverse hires. I would say the last thing is that I'm not sure if there's an organization that I work with today that's not going through transformation. And it's like the buzzword of our time, right? Is transformation. And people are looking for the leaders of the future. And they were already, but then the pandemic shined a spotlight in places, in organizations that nobody wanted a spotlight shown. And it showed leaders for who they were and what they were actually capable of doing. And what organizations saw was they had a lot of leaders who can't actually lead in transformation, true transformation, lead in crisis, who don't have the mental agility, the change agility, the learning agility to actually evolve as they want them to, and as quickly as they want them to. So universally, I can tell you that when clients are coming to us looking for people, they are looking for the leader of the future. They're not looking at what exists today and what needs to be done today. They're looking at their strategy for down the road and the people who can deliver on that strategy. And that's very different, and it might really change who they're looking for.
Yeah. That's interesting. Trish, I want to go to you. The idea of the build versus buy, is that something that comes into thought with you guys as you guys are looking to build out?
Yes. Actually, we had a conversation just yesterday about a technology gap that we have and how to sort of get around that. And we're going to try and build that up from within. So we have, for example, we have a developers kind of in between projects right now. We're going to send this person to do some training for us in this particular technology so that he can learn it, build something that we can work with a partner to initiate, and then get a little bit of experience and then hire a consultant. I mean, it's a long-term sort of plan, but hopefully work with a consultant, get more experience, and then train some staff to be able to do it for us. So in terms of building, yes, but a lot of times we are buying, and often it's because of the sort of narrow labor categories we have to work with. There aren't as many options. We have to sort of take what we can.
That makes sense. Let me ask, and this is for everybody. I know we talked a little bit about this on our prep call yesterday, and it's going to get to some of the remarks I think that Congressman Swalwell will cover in a little bit. But when we're looking at bringing on talent, how are you all taking into consideration some of the non-traditional pathways to professionalism that we're seeing now, right? So whether it's certs in the technology space or going through a 2-year college for different, how are you seeing both in the commercial marketplace as well as in the public sector in the federal government? How are we taking those into account? How are we really assessing the talent in a way that makes sense for the positions? Dr. Coleman, can I ask you to start?
Sorry, that actually was a legit. I was on mute. Actually, being in the government sector, probably need to put a little bit of a spin on that question, because
Sure.
While I don't have a unique model that necessarily can be brought from other companies and applied to DOI, I think what we can do is highlight DOI's My DOI career platform is a tool that might be beneficial to other organizations. Our platform has helped students find internships easier. It's been used for hiring managers to find and recruit more diverse talent. It automatically assigns competencies to courses for the Office of Employment Development. It reviews courses for DEI and A with ease for the Office Employee Development. It also is expanding the functionality of our career page. I know it has a few others that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But the website also makes it easier for visitors to understand what is required to advance in their career or to make a career change by connecting, I think we call it an ecosystem of human capital data, the workforce needs data, and learning and development data. So today, I know we have over 100 occupations on the My DOI career page, and those occupations represent jobs that are like 80% of our DOI workforce that people are currently employed in. So the department's bureaus and offices have voiced a demand for tools to aid in succession and planning and creating a pipeline of leadership positions. So to give an example of how popular our website is, we get an average of 2,000 visitors to the site every day. And previously we would see that many visitors to our predecessor DOI page in a year. So the traffic to the page over the past year has been primarily like employees accessing it, like 15 to 23%, I believe are our numbers via direct marketing. So anecdotally, we know our employees are using the map of occupations to look for opportunities to move within DOI, but to like different geographic locations. And we know prospective employees are looking to My DOI Career to connect, to understand and connect for different job opportunities. So as you can see, this is a pretty cool tool that has a lot of uses and benefits.
And if I could add one example for My DOI Career and how it links up to our workforce data. So we were able to sync up our employment data for a particular occupational series. So in the federal government, we have all these different occupational series. I mentioned over 300 within DOI. There's 350 roughly total in the federal government. So let's say you are a GS 201 HR specialist and you are looking for some reason to make a career change out of HR. So we synced up all of the transfers into a particular series to see what percentage are coming from other occupations. So for example, if you're interested in exploring a career in IT, you'd be able to go onto the IT page and see, okay, 25% of people are coming from program management, another 20% are coming from HR like myself, and these are the skills that I have likely in my current job, and these are the ones that are going to transfer to the new job. So you can kind of see where that skill gap might exist. And then as Liz mentioned, those skills are mapped to actual competencies, the competencies are mapped to actual courses within our learning management ecosystem. So in the future state of this system, people will be able to go see where those gaps are and then go directly to free training within DOI to be able to train up on those skills that they need to gain to be able to make that career jump.
That's great. That's great. So shifting over to on the commercial side, I'm curious, are you seeing that use of data to help kind of migrate towards non-traditional pathways to entry?
Yeah, it's actually a good question. Landon and Liz both described it really well, and the commercial data is very similar in terms of the number one, arguably, but it's the number one reason that people leave is career opportunity and career growth. And yes, salary matters, and yes, other things matter, but and it's not that people are willing to work for less if they have career opportunity. It's just that's the top. It's more of a yes and. So absolutely, that's something that really matters. And people are looking at what organizations are looking at. What's a creative way that you can provide people with the experiences that they're looking for and give them mobility within your organization to incentivize them to continue to learn and develop. I do think that another thing that's come up a lot recently is when you're talking about diversity and inclusion is around structural inclusion within organizations. And it's relevant to career pathing because there's so many structural barriers to people of different underrepresented groups to advancing within an organization. I'll give you a really easy example. Most large global organizations require some kind of global deployment. That's the stepping stone that you take from leadership into the executive ranks is doing a global deployment. Generally speaking, historically, men have taken those rotations and their spouse and children have followed with them. But and that's historically because the male in a dual sex household has the more of the income in that family. So but what we're seeing is that automatically is knocking out so many women from being able to take that type of rotation. There's whole groups of people of other ethnicities who wouldn't do that because of the geo separation from their families, things like that. So it really discriminates against a whole group of people, that one type of policy. And that's just an example. My point is just that we see organizations looking at the structures that exist that are barriers to people being able to move within the organization, and not just some people, but all people having equitable access to being able to move in the organization. So that's a really important side note to the career pathing piece, is that it does also need to be equitable.
Yeah, and we need to take a look at it from that lens, which is just, it's a new to me. I'm sure you're seeing in companies, people are actually starting to take this into consideration, and it's switching up the way that we are driving the requirements that underpin those.
That's right. Yeah, because for decades, people just wanted to talk about training, right? You train around certain things, and you train certain populations to act in a certain way, and you train certain people to accept certain things. But it's really about the structures that are in place that enable or inhibit people from moving around, whether it's in a company or within the government.
Tricia, any thoughts on just the non-traditional? How do you assess the talent that you need? What are some of the different pathways to get in?
So I think it has gotten more flexible over the past few years, just because the candidate pools are smaller and it's just more competitive. We still are limited in some ways because of the criteria we first have to meet. So, if they don't have these 5 things or whatever it is, we're not able to move forward. But outside of that, taking a look at how someone got to where they are, instead of which might have been a little bit untraditional. When we're looking at resumes now, and we're looking at how long people stayed wherever they stayed, it used to be a big deal for us to kick back resumes that where folks didn't stay very long in different places. Well, that's sort of out the window these days. A lot of people are taking gig work, so working on contracts. So we have a lot more flexibility there, and we potentially maybe missed out on some candidates who we thought didn't have good longevity, when really there might have been a really good reason why they had those short-term responsibilities and why their employment was that way. So that's something that shifted for us. But we have those sort of limitations that maybe a private employer might not have, or maybe it could better or more easily work around.
Yeah. And look, I think that's part of the reason you guys are in the organization that we represent, is we're trying to figure out what are the ways to kind of help empower the federal and state and local governments to be able to think about it differently, or allow you guys a little more flexibility in how you bring in talent. So we're really close to time. I do want to give the audience a chance. If there's any questions in the audience, there are microphones on either side. Go ahead, Kevin. Yeah, you're on.
Could you address the question of regional pay? There doesn't seem to be as much flexibility there in the federal sector. I think locally here in DC, there's a lot of government agency based for a lot of different jobs, but we have a lot more tech companies, Amazon coming in, higher cost of living. But even out in the Department of Interior, out in the oil patch, you have BLM areas that are co-located with lots of oil and gas activity where rents are sky high. You have New York rents out in the middle of nowhere sometimes to rent a garage. So could you address a little bit about regional pay, maybe what the private sector might be an option to? It is something that even companies, tech companies are struggling with.
Landon, did you hear that?
I think I caught most of it. If you could summarize just a
Sure. So for the folks in the thing, the question was about kind of pay disparities and how both the public sector as well as the private sector are dealing with certain pay gaps and pay disparities for the same work in different regions of the country or regions of the world.
Sure. So that can be a challenge with being within the federal sector. We have a fairly rigid structure defined by position classification. While there are benefits to that rigid structure at times. So for example, a few years back when at OPM, when looking at the equal pay for equal work issue across gender, the federal government had less of a disparity by and large than the general workforce did. due in part because of the transparency in what salaries are posted, and as well as other factors due to classification. It does occasionally put us at a disadvantage with private sector in especially locations where the cost of living might not be driving salary, but the competition for the workforce is driving it. So we've seen this and have sought and received approval for special salary tables, especially for example, oil and gas occupations in certain locations, to be able to help compete with some of those private sector salaries. I think a really good example of this in action, actually just yesterday was announced that we're going to be DOI as well as the U.S. Department of Agriculture are providing a substantial increase in as supplementary pay to wildland firefighters so that we can better compare in the way we're compensating federal wildland firefighters in comparison to the state level as well as to private sector. So those are things that take time, and they take a ton of cooperation across a lot of different entities, but ultimately it's something that when there's enough of a driving factor, we're able to get it done.
Great. So I want to thank the panel. I know we have about 1 or 2 minutes left for this. Real quick round robin. Any closing thoughts that you guys have, and then we'll bring the Congressman up here. So Tricia, can we start with you?
I wanted to just talk about. Sorry. One of the questions we had talked about sort of in preparing for this was what can policymakers do? What are some things that policymakers can do to try and assist us in meeting our hiring goals? And one of the things I wanted to bring up was with regard to COVID and people being able to work from home now, and the sort of fear that we kind of have in the back of our head that at some point everyone's going to say, okay, get back to work. And then what then? And having some flexibility within the contracts to not have that fear anymore. So we have sort of some built-in where we know we'll be okay. It takes an awful long time for folks to get through the security process. So we're losing candidates because of that. If you have a couple of offers on the board and one of them I can start tomorrow and the next one's going to take a month or more, we're losing candidates for that potentially. Increases based on inflation. So that we can have the ability to find people and to keep people, which really is almost more important, probably more important than finding new talent, is keeping the talent you have. I think that's it.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Michelle.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, on the pay issue, I admit to not being a pay expert, but I'm happy to connect you with one of my colleagues who lives and breathes the pay every single day, and they're more than happy to chat about it. They love it. So if you want to set up a call with somebody just to chat, they're more than happy to. I think my overarching comments on this topic though are that we're in an interesting age right now, and it's the era of the worker. It's the era of people and what the individual wants and the experience that they want to have, and how that connects with the work that they do and the life that they live. And it's really an interesting time. And it's an interesting opportunity for all employers, regardless of whether it's government or private, because you can be a part of that. And your talent has always been the number one lever you have to drive whatever your strategy is, whether it's the mission of the government or delivering on shareholder value. It doesn't matter. Your talent is your number one lever. And it's time to embrace that, because it is the era of the worker right now, in a really special way. And some really cool things happen with companies and organizations who embrace that rather than fearing it. So that's my parting thought.
That's great. Landon, then Dr. Coleman.
Sure, and just want to thank everybody again for our being able to participate in today's panel, and to the panelists for their comments today. I guess just some closing thoughts for the Department of the Interior. One of the ways that we are trying to improve upon our diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility practices is through the hiring process, both hiring and retention. But one of the first things we did before we even got to work with developing a DEIA strategic plan was look at which hiring authorities were leading to the best diversity outcomes in bringing in people from all different backgrounds to be able to perform in our positions. And among the top performing hiring authorities are those that we're calling next generation hiring. And so that's been a really big point of emphasis for us. So paid internships, public land corps hiring, people that are doing work in service of public lands and on public lands, and being able to convert them to a permanent position is really critical for us. But one of the main barriers, to speak to a point Michelle brought up in a previous question, the availability of paid student opportunities. I know early in my career, I was a beneficiary of working an unpaid volunteer opportunity, working in unpaid roles to gain experience. That's not always an option to every person. And we create barriers to diversity when we're relying solely on unpaid internships and unpaid student opportunities. So one area in which we're really trying to improve within the department right now is the availability of paid student opportunities. And ultimately, a lot of that depends also upon funding. And so we're looking to the future in terms of how we recruit our next generation of talent, and paid student opportunities is a linchpin of that for our strategy.
Thanks. Dr. Coleman.
I love what Michelle said, and as an IO psychologist, I've always argued that people are the most important asset in an organization. So it's great to see organizations realizing and embracing that now. And I would argue that organizations also really do need an ever-ready workforce, and one that's highly resilient and adaptable to change, and continuously engaged in growth activities that are preparing them for their next move as well. So at DOI, we want to be leaders in the federal workforce with our assessment practices and our tools and resources for our employees, such as our My DOI career platform. So we're encouraging our employees to explore our opportunities within our own organization, and to grow here with us as an organization. So we're hoping to do that and be leaders within the federal workforce. And we thank you very much for recognizing that and having us here with you today.
Well, thank you guys on the phone, and thank you guys in panel in person. We really appreciate it. And round of applause. Mr. Bob, if you want to come up and introduce the Congressman. Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Thank you, panel. It's my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, Congressman Eric Swalwell. Congressman Swalwell was first elected to Congress in 2012, represents California's 15th district, which proudly includes Workday's headquarters in Pleasanton. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee and the House Homeland Security Committee. Additionally, Congressman Swalwell serves on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, where he chairs the Intelligence Modernization and Readiness Subcommittee. This subcommittee focuses on personnel management, workforce issues, and IT modernization for all 17 intel agencies. With that, let me turn it over to Congressman Swalwell. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ross and ADI, for hosting this forum, and Bobby and the Workday team for stitching together all of you to take on this important topic of how we recruit and retain the best and brightest in the federal workforce, which, of course, as you know, is the largest workforce in America. And I'll tell you that I joined the federal workforce at age 20 when I was an intern for my member of Congress, Alan Tauscher. I was here on September 11th. I had started the morning working at the Washington Sports Club, where from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m., I handed out gym towels to senators and members of Congress. During the day, I'd work as an intern, and then in the evening, I'd serve the same members of Congress burritos and tacos at Tortilla Coast. So gym towels in the morning and tacos in the evening, and in between was my internship. But September 11 was a day that kind of focused my career, I would say, because I was in college on a soccer scholarship, rehabbing an injury, and realized on that day that I didn't want to focus on soccer as much anymore. I wanted to focus on academics and public service, stay in Washington. So I transferred to the University of Maryland, stayed in Maryland, went to law school, and then went back home and worked as a prosecutor, and then rejoined the federal workforce in 2013. And so it was a sense of service that drove me in to the federal government. And I want to tell you, recently, not too long ago, I was ready to leave the federal government. I've been in Congress for 10 years. I have 3 kids in diapers. The only way to get sleep is to take a work trip. That's how it works in our house. My wife just started her own business. And so back in the winter, we were starting to plan our exit and to not seek re-election. And we didn't get as far as talking to Korn Ferry about what post-congressional careers would look like, but I had an idea. And then on the 1-year anniversary of January 6th, Speaker Pelosi hosted John Meacham and Doris Kearns Goodwin. And they came and spoke to members of Congress. And Meacham told us something that I'll never forget. He said that we are living right now, as people who work in public service, in one of the few times in American history, and you can count them on one hand, where the chapter you're living in is unwritten and unknown. We don't know how it's going to end. And he laid it out: the Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War II, and probably 1968. And he said, you are in a chapter where we just don't know how this is going to end. It's been a rocky time in our country's history. And so I went back home to my wife and I told her, well, all these plans we have of leaving the federal workforce, going out into the private sector, I would feel awfully guilty about doing that, knowing that we are in this unwritten chapter. And I'm not the main author of the chapter, but I think any person who works in public service, and I think anyone who works in the federal government works in public service, we all have a hand in writing the conclusion of this chapter. And we want it to be a chapter that renews and redeems democracy. So I'm staying in the federal workforce. And I tell you that story because there's a lot we can do to reform the workforce and recruit more people. But at the end of the day, every person who comes to work every day for the federal government has to have a sense of purpose, that they are sacrificing whatever they could do in the private sector, whatever comforts they could have, because they're doing something to make their country better. Now, as the last panel discussed, there's a lot that we can do to ease that sacrifice. And I want to talk about some of those different programs that I've been working on. But it really has to be about purpose. And I think the federal government could recruit more people if it was more purpose focused, especially with this next generation, Generation Z, Gen Z, who's coming out, and money's important to them, but purpose, to me, at least in my interactions, is even more important. But this generation, as you know, is a generation that is saddled with student loan debt. They are joining 40 million Americans who collectively have $1 trillion in student loan debt. That's a problem I know myself. I still have about $80,000 in student loan debt. And I see that this debt defers the dreams of starting a family, starting a business, buying a home, the pillars of the American dream. And what I've tried to do in Congress and on the Intelligence Committee is to try and incentivize people to go into the federal workforce by taking on and relieving their student loan debt. And so we've made reforms in the Intelligence Committee, the community, as far as how we recruit people and the packages we can offer. But I think across the country, we could bring the interest rate down to 0. And I have legislation to do that. I frankly don't even think that the president needs legislation to do that. I think by executive order, under the same principles that he used to bring, and the prior president used, to defer interest on student loans, could be used to just keep the interest rate at 0. We have the public loan forgiveness program. It's a great program. 10 years, any debt you have remaining, forgiven. The problem that so many people, especially in the federal workforce, encounter is they can't make it to 10 years. That the debt, especially if you have a payment program that keeps going up and up each year, that as you get closer and closer to 10 years, you're going to have to step out into the private sector. And for many people, this is a missed opportunity to serve. So we begin our relief and our legislation immediately. It's relief as you go. So year 1, you get relief. You don't get full relief, but you keep building up to that waterfall of relief at year 10. So just slightly restructuring how we provide relief to those who go into public service. On the issue of regional pay, I'm so with you on that as a representative in the San Francisco Bay Area. I think we really need to examine everything we do, not just on pay, but also on benefits. The cost of healthcare is more in San Francisco, Washington, New York, Boston, Seattle, Chicago, Houston, Dallas. As the president considers student loan debt relief, I'm urging the White House as they set, an income cap on who can get the relief to take into account the regional differences. Because someone who makes $100,000.01 in San Francisco and someone who makes $99,999 in Omaha, the person in Omaha may be eligible if the income cap's at $100,000. They may just be like $1 or so apart in income, but they live and experience completely different lives as far as cost of living. And we have to do a better job of accounting for that. We also must to account, and the panelist, Michelle from Korn Ferry, alluded to diversity. I get briefed every day by the best and brightest of our intelligence community. And over the past 10 years, I've not seen many changes as far as what the table looks like from the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, as far as who's briefing me. It's largely older white males, and we have a long way to go as far as recruiting people to come into the federal government in the intelligence community who are people of color. In fact, in the federal workforce, 33%, only 33% of the senior level positions are people of color. And so that's a priority for us on the committee, is to expand, who we recruit, where we recruit as it relates to, vocational schools, technical schools, and colleges, but really expanding and reframing what the criteria is. On the issue of onboarding, we want to attract the best and brightest, especially as it relates to cyber and AI, but it happens to be that in a country as diverse as ours, many of those individuals were born outside of the United States or have parents who were born outside the United States and have traveled, to India, to China, to Eastern Europe. And that travel and the relationships to those family members just gums up the works in their ability to onboard into the federal government. And so a friend of mine is going through this right now on the technical side, wants to join the federal workforce in the intelligence community. His parents were born in India and is having a hell of a time doing this because of the number of foreign nationals he knows. So if we want to recruit people who have the best skills, that means we have to recognize that with those skills comes a diverse background, and that should not be an inhibitor for them joining the federal workforce. And so through, adding AI to help us process these background checks, so doing what we call now kind of a evolving background check. So it's not just one background check and then 5 years later we check again. We have a reoccurring system. We hope to bring down the onboarding times. And then finally, I can tell you, married to someone who has her own business and is able to work from home, the ability to work from home and have young children is a workplace benefit. And if the federal government can figure that out across the workforce, I think we're going to attract the best and brightest. And so really seeing that COVID did not affect our productivity. In fact, as the Wall Street Journal reported, for most professionals, they were working 48 additional minutes a day because of remote work. Now there's quality of life issues associated with overburdening the workforce, but we have to trust our workforce and give them more flexibility. And that doesn't mean entirely working from home, but I think having more accommodations, especially for women who are in the workforce, and that of course affects their ability to be promoted if they don't have that opportunity. But we can do all of that, but if we don't give people a sense of purpose, they're not going to want to come and work for the federal government. And boy, do we have challenges that we could fire them up to take on, whether it's on climate rescue, whether it's on making sure our kids are safer in our communities and their schools from mass shootings, whether it's addressing, the border crisis where the countries in the Northern Triangle have no economic opportunity or security and are fleeing everything and coming to our country, taking on issues that affect not only the United States, but our global relationships. We have to really project and aim those missions to the next generation. And I think that will inspire them to believe that they can be a part of a workforce that does good. And that can transcend Republican Party politics, Democratic Party politics, and really be about America inspiring the next generation to do what we do best, which is to take on the biggest problems and offer the boldest solutions. So that's why I'm staying. That's why I filed for re-election. That's why I'm going to be in the federal workforce, I hope, for a couple more years, is because of the purpose that I believe it offers and the unwritten chapters that I think we all want to be a part of writing and ending that renews this great country. So with that, happy to chat and take on any questions.
Representative, I want to introduce, this is Jason Miller from Fed News Network. He agreed to moderate, ask a few questions.
I got the hard job. I like walking.
Okay.
You want to walk or you want to stand?
No, let's
We can get you a mic. We could walk with me.
Yeah.
I'm a walker. Anyways, thank you so much. It was really great to hear from you. It was good to meet you. Thank you all for doing this. As Ross mentioned, Jason Miller, Federal News Network. Of course, I do the shameless plug, federalnewsnetwork.com, and of course, 1500 AM if your AM button still works in your radio, which I swear it does. It's a joke, it always works. All right. So, Congressman, I'm going to start with, first of all, you're one of the few congressmen I've met in the last 20 years that can actually spell the word IT. So thank you for that. Most, you go up to Capitol Hill, you talk to them about something and they kind of give you that look like, yes, it's very important. And then they move on. So let's start with that is, when you talk about the workforce and the biggest challenges for feds specifically, and actually probably, I think Wayne, who I've talked to many times, would tell you, hiring in that STEM world. So what's the thoughts about how to kind of encourage that people to go into STEM more, to train up, to upskill, reskill? We saw that in the last administration. It was probably one of their better ideas that came out from a federal workforce perspective. What's your thoughts on Capitol Hill, how to promote that, how to kind of encourage that?
And Jason, I appreciate what you said about IT. Don't give me too much credit though. I was in the car the other day with some of my staff and I saw a concert series in San Francisco had released its headliners, and I read out loud that Green Day was going to be there. And then I said, kind of faking that I knew who the band was, I said, and even SZA is going to be there. And my staff was like, sir, that's SZA, not SCA. So I have hit my own ceiling of understanding.
People have that challenge with the DHS version.
That's right.
SZA too. So
that's right. Yeah, different SZA. So I believe for the next generation, especially from, again, my interactions with them in the private sector and even my own staff, is that it doesn't have to be a lifetime commitment. And I think a lot of people look at the federal government and believe I'm committing to a career for the next 30 to 40 years. And I don't know if I want to lock myself in. And, the way it works and its, seniority system is you really have to stay for a while to accrue any of the benefits or responsibilities. And I would like to see us, have, shorter career prospects to take on, the near and midterm challenges that we have. And I think right now, what's one of the greatest challenges we have in IT, it's ransomware, right? So if you could inspire, high school and college students and even technical school students who have the IT skills to help us be cyber defenders, whether it's at the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, CISA, inspire people to go in, for short-term jobs where they, again, have purpose. I think you could get talented people into the federal workforce who don't feel like they have to make a lifelong commitment. And so I really think, repurposing and reskilling also means that we have to rethink, how we recruit these young men and women.
We know, for instance, and we'll go back to DHS, they have the Cyber Talent Management Program. It's a program that has taken some time to get going. Would you foresee Congress supporting something like that, but more broadly, which is this idea of we're going to maybe change the hiring rules, we're going to up the pay, but also really focus on that mission that you talked a lot about. Hey, you have to have a very purpose-driven reason to come to government. And again, it could be, we're going to do it for a 3-year term or 5-year term or however long it's going to be. Is that something that you could see Congress kind of getting their head around? And you're one person out of 535, but.
Yeah, yes. And that goes exactly to what I would like to see us do, is have, shorter and almost define, it's a 3-year. And by the way, so if you're in the State Department or some of the other intelligence agencies, when you are dispatched abroad, you know what the term is. It's like a 2+1 system, or now it's 3 years. And so you're committing to 3 years in that country, and then you have your horizon date. And that works well for members, in the State Department, because if they want to stay in the State Department, they know if they are dispatched to another country, it's 3 more years. And I think that keeps them going because they either like it or they leave. And if we could do that on Homeland Security, if you could have a 3-year commitment or a 5-year commitment, and by the way, the military is the same way, I do believe you would be able to attract, more young people who wouldn't feel like they have to sign up, as I said, for a lifelong career before they really start to realize any of the benefits.
There's a whole set of things behind that, the hiring practices, the time it takes. I know we can go down the path. I'm going to, though, jump to the bill that you sponsored and got passed, Industrial Control Systems Bill. Maybe just give 30 seconds on that, and then so in case folks don't know, and then maybe we could talk a little bit about why that's important as well to drive that ransomware issue, cybersecurity.
It's House Resolution Bill 7777, which is not only the winning numbers on a slot machine, I think it's a winning formula as it relates to cybersecurity. And so it would essentially have CISA, who provides, the cyber defense for the Department of Homeland Security against election infrastructure, private sector, critical infrastructure. It would provide, their industrial control system training free, whether in person or virtually, to anyone who works in those industries. And it really is just recognizing that, ransomware is affecting not only large businesses where you used to have to be, 10 feet tall to be a target, but now small businesses are being hit, school districts are being hit, local police departments are being hit, restaurants and dental offices are being hit. And so it really allows, their training to be imparted upon, anyone, frankly, who would want to learn more about cyber defense. And in Congress, I've learned on the issue of ransomware that this is an issue that many of my colleagues, it's intimidating. And even for me, I'm not, technically trained in computer science, but I recognize the threat to small business. And so I've tried to bring in to my colleagues in the Congress folks from DHS, from the White House, but also from the private sector. We had Chris Krebs and Alex Stamos come in, and just to teach my colleagues the difference between ransomware and Chinaware, because I was afraid that many wouldn't know the difference. And I told them, let's do this at like the 100 level, not like the 200, 300 graduate level, because many of us in Congress are just afraid to ask questions, because then it reveals that we don't know the topic. And so you really have to talk at the lowest level so that we're all on the same page about the threat. And then on the workforce side, fund, the need.
One of the things that I've seen over the last 3 minutes, got it. Over the last, and I want to get to audience questions, so I'll make it quick. But one of the things I've seen over the last maybe 15 years is a shift in CISA in terms of their partnership with private sector. But one of the missing pieces is the sharing of threat intelligence within the intelligence community. And since you brought up the intelligence committee, can you maybe talk a little bit about does your bill kind of take in, okay, how do you take maybe classified threat intelligence, anonymize it, or bring it down to unclassified but sensitive that can be shared more broadly, or does it give the industrial control system owners and operators the ability to have a security clearance? Do you address that at all?
Yeah, so there's the ICS, Industrial Control Systems training. Part of that training is telling industry where to go, who you can trust, when you recognize either a threat, vulnerability, or an attack has occurred. Now, what you brought up is a completely separate issue, which is one, we still have not cleared enough professionals in critical infrastructure. For example, there's an oil and gas company that I have worked with where only the CEO is cleared. And you can imagine the time constraints on like a Fortune 500 company CEO who's not going to be able to, come into a skiff, wherever that may be, a secure compartmentalized information facility, the only place you can go to get classified information. So what we've tried to do, first and foremost, in critical infrastructure, have the federal government clear more professionals, whether it's, the CISO, the chief information security officer at a company, or even their deputy, so that they can work, with the Bureau or the Department of Homeland Security. But second is to develop trust. And right now, a lot of companies are still a little bit nervous about allowing the federal government, the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, to come in and look at their systems. And I don't think it's because they've done anything wrong. It's just fear of, shareholder compliance, that if I allowed someone to look at our books and now they find an issue, then we're getting audited, or, we have, some sort of SEC investigation, and we just wanted to get these ransomware actors out of our system. And so the FBI, I think, has done a great job at the field office level of trying to share that that's not what they're there for. You can turn over to them what you want to turn over to them. They're not coming to get the keys to your system. But yeah, these are all issues that we think about every day.
It's a liability issue that's been around since the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act of 2015. Questions? We have time for one. Let's if it's two quick ones, then I'll get in trouble. Just, let me know who you are.
Hi, Jay Case, research engineer. I've been working at NASA, and my major concern is I took the traditional science identity route, weed out courses, survived, stuck with it. Now I'm trying to reach back. My purpose is to make sure women, African Americans, Hispanics are more represented in science. 2022, I look to the left and right of me, there still isn't the representation. It's a big deal because we're just only adulthood away from the demographics of this country shifting, and we don't have enough people with the skill sets in science and engineering. Reality is, as you may already know, 3/4 of this country don't even have 4-year degrees. So my concern is, my goal and my mission is to help Congress, help people figure out how do we take the professionals, the people who are in it, and go to the actual populations, give them a sense of belonging and purpose, and help them understand that civic engagement, incentivize professionals to get them into these communities so the barriers for entry could be less. And I'm talking about, so pretty much.
Yeah, no, I think I get the gist of it.
Yeah, I mean.
So one, thank you for working at NASA and speaking of like a purpose-driven place. Two, I think what you were hitting on, mentoring, also recognizes that I think all of us have a responsibility in our careers to use both hands, not just to reach up and find mentors who can lift us up, but once someone like you, made it to NASA, don't have a lot of people who look like you there, to reach down and use the other hand and lift up, people in communities that would not necessarily be touched or, reached out to. But at the end of the day, it comes down, especially in a technical job, doing research engineering at NASA, to skills, right? And what I see across the country is too many communities are absolutely left behind in these skills deserts where we don't invest in our kids at the earliest of ages. And I have 2 kids who go to schools in a lottery system. And to me, that's just crazy that any system in America, we call it the lottery. So like there's winners and losers in the lottery. And that shouldn't be the case. Every kid, should have a government that believes in their public education and funds it. And I think that, is a values and principles issue, but one that cannot be lost. And then finally, I think as Michelle pointed out earlier, it goes back to criteria, because in hiring, I have come to learn in my own office as I've sought to make it a diverse office. And I'm proud of the diversity we've had in our office up and down, from the entry-level position to the chief of staff position. But I've come to learn that a lot of hiring is just about your own network. And if you're a white guy, chances are your network is mostly made up of, other white people. So you can't just go to your circle of friends. And that's why I think changing the criteria, as was described earlier, is so important in who you're able to attract. So again, thank you for working at NASA. And I think that is a nice way to conclude as I started, which is, give people purpose and you'll attract the best and brightest. So thank you.
Let's give the Congressman a round of applause. I'll hand it back over to Ross, or or just say goodbye. You're excused.
Thank you very much to Congressman. Thank you to Workday. And thank you guys for joining us for our second session. Bye-bye. No, thank you, guys. Appreciate it.